It's a real story. Do not trust the blooms. This garden beauty is built on a horrifying secret. The letter arrived on a crisp autumn morning, sealed with a wax emblem of a skeletal hand, holding a rose. It spoke of an inheritance, a sprawling estate nestled in the rolling hills of Blackwood Hollow, from an Aunt Agnes I'd only met once as a child. The estate was legendary, for its garden, whispered to be a marvel of nature, capable of curing ailments and inspiring awe. As a botanist struggling to make my mark, the prospect of studying such a place was irresistible. The photos in the included brochure showed vibrant blooms in impossible colors, a tapestry of life, so lush it seemed to defy reality. A thrill, a mix of excitement and unease, coursed through me. Blackwood Hollow had its own dark legends, but the lure of the garden, the promise of discovery, was too strong to resist. I packed my bags, leaving behind the mundane world for a place rumored to be touched by magic, or something far more sinister. The manor loomed against the twilight sky, a grand, Gothic structure draped in ivy. It felt less like a home and more like a forgotten sentinel. The air was still, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something subtly sweet but cloying. The garden, even in the fading light, was a spectacle. Flowers I only read about in ancient texts bloomed in profusion there, colors unnaturally vivid. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the gravel path. As I stepped onto the porch, a cold wind snaked around me, carrying a whisper that seemed to slither into my ear. It was not the wind. It was a sound I could not quite place. A faint, mournful sigh. A shiver traced its way down my spine, a premonition of the darkness that lay beneath the surface of this beautiful, terrible place. My first few days were a whirlwind of exploration. The garden was a labyrinth of pathways, each turn revealing a new, breathtaking vista. The plants were unlike anything I ever seen. Roses with petals like velvet, their scent intoxicating yet strangely unsettling. Lilies that glowed faintly in the twilight, but there was an unnatural perfection to it all, a uniformity that felt manufactured rather than organic. The soil itself was oddly dark and crumbly, almost too rich. As I knelt to examine a particularly vibrant crimson bloom, my fingers brushed against something hard and smooth beneath the soil. It felt like bone. I dismissed it as a rock, a strange one perhaps, but a rock nonetheless. Still, a nagging feeling of unease began to take root in my mind, as persistent as the garden's relentless growth. I found the old gardener shed tucked away behind a thick hedge of thorny bushes. It was dusty and filled with cobwebs, but the tools were strangely well maintained. Among the usual trowels and pruning shears, I found a collection of heavy, rusted shovels and picks, and a large, canvas-covered container. Curiosity piqued. I lifted the lid of the container. Inside, nestled, amongst gardening gloves and twine, were several large, bleached white objects. They were undeniably bones. Not animal bones, I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach. These were human bones. A femur, a skull fragment, a rib cage. The air in the shed grew heavy, thick, with a suffocating dread. The end quote, rock and quote, I'd found earlier suddenly took on a horrifying significance. Hidden beneath the loose floorboard in the study, I discovered a leather-bound journal. It was Aunt Agnes, her elegant script, filling the pages with entries that started innocently enough, detailing her love for the garden. But as I read on, the tone shifted. Her words became increasingly frantic, her descriptions of the garden taking on a sinister edge. She wrote of, end quote, feeding the blooms, end quote, of, end quote, giving back to the earth, end quote, and of the, end quote, whispers from below, end quote. There were cryptic references to, end quote, the price of beauty, end quote, and the, end quote, sacrifices required, end quote. The entries grew more disjointed, filled with sketches of grotesque figures intertwined with roots and flowers. A cold, clammy fear began to spread through me as the horrifying truth started to dawn. Armed with a shovel and a growing sense of dread, I returned to the spot where I found the bone-like object. The sun had set, casting long, unsettling shadows. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the old house, made me jump. Taking a deep breath, I plunged the shovel into the dark, rich soil. It was surprisingly easy to dig. Just inches below the surface, the shovel struck something hard. My heart hammered against my ribs as I carefully cleared away the earth. It was another bone, and then another, and another. They were intertwined with the roots of the vibrant flowers, the roots seemingly wrapped around the skeletal remains. The sweet, cloying scent of the garden suddenly felt suffocating, like the smell of death disguised as perfume. As I continued to dig, a new sound emerged from the silence, a faint, almost imperceptible whispering. It seemed to emanate from the very ground around me, a low murmur that I could not quite decipher. It was like a multitude of voices, all speaking at once, their words just out of reach. The air grew colder, despite the exertion of digging. The beautiful flowers around me seemed to sway in a breeze that did not exist. I looked up, scanning the dark garden. Nothing, but the whispers persisted, growing slightly louder, more insistent. They were mournful, pleading, and laced with a chilling undercurrent of anger. The garden was not just fertilized with remains. It was haunted by the souls of those buried within it. Aunt Agnes and Journal detailed strange rituals performed in the garden at night. She wrote of, end quote, listening to the earth, end quote, of, end quote, communing with the roots, end quote, and of, end quote, offering sustenance, end quote. She described the moonless nights as the most potent, when the, end quote, garden is most hungry, end quote. I realized, with a sickening certainty, that the, end quote, sustenance, end quote, was not fertilizer from a bag. It was something far more gruesome. The journal entries became more and more disturbing, hinting at a darker purpose behind the garden's unnerving beauty. She spoke of a, end quote, bargain, end quote, made with the earth, a pact that demanded a terrible price for the garden. Unnatural vitality. The whispers I heard were the echoes of that price. Driven by a horrifying curiosity and a desperate need for confirmation, I continued to dig in different sections of the garden. The results were the same. Everywhere I turned the earth, I found bones. Skulls with empty sockets staring up at the night sky. Rib cages like brittle cages. Long bones intertwined with thick, fleshy roots. The sheer number of remains was staggering. This was not a few isolated incidents. This was a deliberate, systematic burial ground. The beautiful garden, the pride of Blackwood Hollow, was a monument to a horrifying secret built upon a foundation of death. The whispers intensified, surrounding me, a chorus of tormented souls trapped beneath the vibrant blooms.